This happened about 10 years ago, when my graduating university class of mostly neckbeard electronic engineers went on an unlikely Cancun spring break trip, yearning for the legendary Girls Gone Wild atmosphere from our collective teen conscience. In case you're wondering, expectations were surprisingly met here and there. Going to Cancun was unlikely since we're from Portugal, and graduation trips are usually to the south of Spain, where you get the dubious privilege of experiencing British middle-aged men gone wild instead. However, since we had made some extra money on the side from selling shots at student parties, we managed to afford our much-preferred location. Most of our time in Cancun was spent strolling around the beach, half drunk and half nauseated on watered-down margaritas, chatting up and taking pictures with random spring break chicks. We were doing our best to materialize our internet-warped teen dreams. After 1 week of this, we packed our stuff and got on the plane home, considering it a mild success. Fast forward 4 months into the same year, I got a couch surfing request from 2 Canadian girls. For whoever isn't familiar with couchsurfing, it's basically a backpacker-oriented Airbnb where guests look for a couch to stay on for free and hopefully hosts to hang out with. The girls stayed for 1 week at my place, and it was an absolute riot. They were great chicks, we got along really well, and we ended up staying in touch afterwards. A couple months later, I was reminiscing with a friend about our trip to Cancun and going through the pictures when suddenly, it felt like my brain entered into an alternate reality. One of my girlfriends from the couchsurfing visit had actually been a random spring break chick, posing with my half-drunk friend at some point during our trip. Seeing her in that picture totally blew me away, and in hindsight, it feels like a glitch in the simulation. Seriously, what are the odds? This story happened back in high school, when my girlfriend and I first started dating. We had the same woodworking class and always loved making our projects into competitions with each other, so we always ended up being the risky pair in class. One night before our class the next morning, my parents let her sleep over. I had a dream where I was using the bandsaw, and it snagged my jacket and cut my arm open. I woke up in the morning and told her about it, and she shared with me that she also had a dream about our shop class, where she cut her hand open with a chisel. We wrote it off as a weird coincidence and headed to school. We walked into our woodworking class and I immediately realized that the next part of my project required me to use the bandsaw, and hers required her to use a bench chisel since she was already way ahead of me. We looked at each other nervously and slowly crept towards our task. There were 2 people ahead of me in line to use the only bandsaw, and she was scouting the room for the sharpest bench chisel in the shop. We were both getting closer to our tools when we heard a girl shriek. She had been using a sharp bench chisel and sliced right into the flesh between her thumb and index finger. Then, only seconds later, the guy in front of me shrieked as well. As he looked over to find the source of the first scream, his sleeve had gotten caught in the blade of the bandsaw and pulled his forearm right into it. Panicking, I switched the machine off and pulled him away. My girlfriend and I looked at each other from across the room as if we had just realized we had superpowers. Another weird event just occurred with my girlfriend, and I'm kind of terrified. Our experience in our high school woodworking class is interesting to think back on, but this one's left me extremely confused. She hasn't been feeling all that great since last week, and she was stressed out about some problems with her family. Ever since we first started dating, we had this tradition where if one of us was stressed or upset, the other would make them a little goodie bag. The only rule was that it had to look as if it was cheap and poorly made. I'm not sure why we decided on that, but it was a fun tradition. I went to the store and got a bunch of silly little things I knew she'd enjoy, and when I went to go pick up her favorite candy, I had to make a choice. She loves pixie sticks. I know it's a weird candy to love, but she's hypoglycemic and those are her go-to for it. As I grabbed a bag of pixie sticks, I noticed a bag of the only candy she likes even more, Almond Joys. I thought about it for a second, but decided to stick with my original plan since I didn't want to make it look too expensive. This all happened on Sunday, and she's been out of town until yesterday. Yesterday also happened to be her birthday, so after my last class of the day, I stopped to pick up her birthday cake and the goodie bag at my apartment, and then headed over to her house. I came in and the house was dark and quiet. I walked into her small living room and found her sleeping on the couch. She was shivering and didn't have a blanket, so I carried her into her bedroom, kissed her forehead, and tucked her in. After I closed the door, I noticed the light in the kitchen was on. I walked into the room and, to my surprise, she was sitting at the table, fully awake and a little startled. We looked at each other for a moment and she asked if I was okay. I told her I was shocked that she was there because I had just carried her to bed. She explained that I had come inside, put the cake and goodie bag on the table, and then walked into the living room. Then she said that I walked upstairs with a blanket in my hand and she heard me say, "I love you," before coming back downstairs and walking into the kitchen. I wasn't sure what to think, so I just tried changing the subject by asking her to open her goodie bag. When she pulled out the bag of candy, I was shocked to see that it wasn't a bag of pixie sticks, but instead, almond joys. As I was leaving, she asked if I could stay the night since the whole situation had left us both feeling pretty spooked. I woke up next to her only a couple minutes ago, but we were both sleeping on the couch with Netflix asking us if we were still watching. On the coffee table is an open bag of pixie sticks, and now I'm afraid to look upstairs. Update. After some suggestions from people online who have read this story, we're both heading to the doctor today just to be safe. Update 2. I took Annie with me to the ER today, and sure enough, carbon monoxide appeared to be the culprit. Before I left to head to her house, I had left my car outside next to my apartment. We had a power outage about an hour before, and the generator was running. I'm not an expert in this area, so I'm not sure how, but carbon monoxide filled up the inside of my car, and I must have been bathing in it on my way to her house. It wasn't a whole lot, and the window was open, so it was really brief contact, but I've had a few concussions in my life, which makes me more susceptible to things like this. I spent the day breathing in pure oxygen at the hospital, and I'm letting my car air out as well, so thank you all for the advice.